detention of a professor by airport security for carrying a standard GPS device has highlighted the growing tensions between rapid technological innovations and the static security frameworks. So let us delve deep into what our experts have to say about this.
It was a fine day, early morning flight to Delhi from Bangalore. So in Bangalore International Airport, I was just carrying a GPS for my class, right? I was traveling to a place I need to take deliver a class where I need to explain people on, how GPS signals are, one can look into it and how one can able to distinguish spoofing and other things, and how one can look at the quality of GPS signals and so on. It's technically for the class, and but then in the scanning, it was. Perceived as a satellite phone in the beginning. Like, the personnel was asking me, are you carrying a satellite phone? I was shocked to hear this because, in fact, I've never touched a satellite phone also until then. But then, I said no. But the moment he, identified it and took out of the pouch and he has understood there's something written on it called GPS. So it's government GPS. So he immediately changed his tone and saying like, oh, you're carrying GPS. And then it has become a big, situation. Like he has been calling other officers and saying he's carrying GPS. I have no clue since I'm from the field, and it's a very basic instrument. I personally feel it is very less powerful than the mobile phone which we all carry, right? In that case, I was panicked, but then I asked them why it is not allowed and trying to understand their perspective as well. But then there are certain rules and regulations which have shown up. Different period of different versions of that were shown up, and it is largely perceived as satellite phones slash GPS receivers. And the understanding to them is considering this receiver as a passive, not as a passive one, as an active one, which means it is not just receiving signal from satellites to identify location, but it also can communicate to satellites. But I try to explain them, see, I'm also a professor in this, teaching over a decade. This is not just a device which can communicate your information to the servers. But then, no, they said, we know that we have been handling many cases and we know what is GPS. So this is how it works. So then the further step on this was a little bit of challenging process for anyone to undergo. They said the next step. I said, please carry the device. Just allow me to fly. But then it didn't happen. So they said like, no, we won't allow. In this case of GPS, I'm sure any other device any other thing which they confiscate, they can confiscate it and allow people to fly at least, because the GPS what I have carried it at least very old and it's much cheaper than my ticket. So and I also need to be there on time in place. So but then the procedure didn't allow. The procedure as per them was like handing over to the local police station. They're a different story, like of one has to go get out of the airport with all the protocols. I absolutely respect those protocols. But then when we are into police station, the police station also asks several questions: why you're carrying this, what kind of device it is. But I was shocked to hear a statement at first saying like, don't you know Garmin GPS is banned in India? But I was completely surprised because I know that a particular brand of GPS is Garmin GPS is banned, but not every Garmin GPS as far as I know. But then the police station also has some processes. Unfortunately, I landed up early in the morning. So I have to go through the process of waiting for a couple of hours for an officers to come. And a lot of scary things. Hey, it's like this thing will happen, that thing will happen. And they've shown me, don't worry. One positive statement is don't worry. We get every, several devices like this. Though we don't know why, it is coming to police station, but we are not happy about it as well. But several devices are coming and there are certain protocols that we have to follow. You have to wait. So that eventually it is a waiting time of 4 to 5 hours in a police station. And at times the mobile phones were also confiscated for temporarily, saying that, do not communicate with anyone. It's a very panic situation of a person who encountered this for the first time, do not know whether you have committed a big crime. You really don't know what actually there in your device and why it is being confiscated. Then the way out of that, is to write an apology letter saying that in this case, but it is more of like, the person is not aware of such rules exist. So there's no point in writing an apology of saying like, I made a crime or something like that. But anyway, this is the common protocol being followed in many cases, and some cases the protocols are different. Now, be it in a hand carrier, be it in, check-in baggage, this kind of devices are not allowed in certain circumstances. And mostly people says it is more of the antenna which is coming out of certain types of device. If the antenna is not there in the GPS handled device, and if it is not written as GPS, I guess even if it is written as GNSS, it would have been not picked up by people. That's only the color, the structure, the kind of wordings which are written on the device are actually the clue factor which people have investigated. But then this the entire thing has taken 5 to 6 hours. And but then eventually nobody can make to go back to the flight because you go to airport 3 hours before, not 7 8 hours before to handle this, and eventually it caused so much of pain. Just before I conclude, I was in a bit of incident. I felt really bad about a particular thing. A guy who made a nuisance in airport was carried to the police station by an escort and a vehicle, whereas I was asked to come along with a policeman for a kilometer by dragging my luggage and so on. But this is how it has been there, and on the way I was kind of promoted as a person who is carrying GPS. I felt, am I carrying something very strange? It was a fine day, early morning flight to Delhi from Bangalore. So in Bangalore International Airport, I was just carrying a GPS for my class, right? I was traveling to a place. I need to take a, deliver a class where I need to explain people on, how GPS signals are, one can look into it, and how one can able to distinguish spoofing and other things, and how one can look at the quality of GPS signals and so on. It's technically for the class, and but then in the scanning, it was perceived as a satellite phone in the beginning. Like, the personnel was asking me, "Are you carrying a satellite phone?" I was shocked to hear this because, in fact, I've never touched a satellite phone also until then. But then, I said no. But the moment he, identified it and took out of the pouch, and he has understood there's something written on it called GPS. So it's government GPS. So he immediately changed his tone and saying like, "Oh, you're carrying GPS." And then it has become a big, situation. Like he has been calling other officers and saying he's carrying GPS. I have no clue since I'm from the field, and it's a very
But legally, if we look at the case which is pendente lite, which is pending in the Delhi High Court, um, the one issue which comes around is the ambiguity of the statutory authority. And it's actually boiling down to two authorities only, not about the Ministry of Home Affairs or the Ministry of Science and Tech or Ministry of Finance. So the statutory authority of the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security comes from the Section 5A of the Aircraft Act 1934, which is only about a specific phrase which is about ensuring aviation security. Now, the petition in the High Court argues that the Act does not explicitly empower the Civil Aviation Bureau, which is BCAS for the purposes of this discussion, to regulate non-transmitting navigation devices. And at the same time, another conflicting aspect is that, of course, the Telecommunications Act is just very recent because the last one we had was like in the colonial era, 1933, the Telegraph Act. So, considering that, since we have a renewed mandate with similar provisions with the Department of Telecom under the Ministry of Communications, they also are the sole authority when it comes to restriction and regulating of communication devices. So, what happens is that the legal gray area comes in as to how to ensure that when this intersection between BCAS and DOT is happening, it doesn't cause more confusion from, I would say, an industry point of view, as well as for end users who are consumers, or let us say travelers in this case, since we are talking about aviation context, traveling per se, and even for research purposes, because again, not every single GPS related device is banned. That's another thing altogether.
This was something which was very bizarre that I heard in the morning. We did make our efforts to see how we could best resolve it because it was early morning and people are sleeping. But we did reach to the highest levels in the system. And that is the time when he mentioned some circular, this addendum of 2020, 02 of 2022, and the amendments thereon. So, I mean, corrigation into the. Incidentally, I could not find it on any government website. In fact, I did try to make a last ditch effort last night, also almost till 2 in the night. Scriptin had some references of this thing, and every time you go there, they want you to give you a paid account and or upload some documents to get access to something. But again, the addendum was not visible anywhere. I mean, I can very well understand the kind of reporting that happened, and I have known Professor Nityanandan since more than a decade plus, and he's a respectable man. He's been writing articles to strengthen national security, and he's done a lot of work which I cannot talk about here, but he's strengthened India. And the same person is now being reported upon as a person who's been haggled by the police. I mean, there's something in some cases it can really leave dark scars. I mean, it is just that in this instant case, things got resolved. But what if there was somebody who was slightly high-handed and it would have taken a completely different journey?
I think it is also important that in addition to the rules being unambiguous, they should also be easily accessible so that they're known to everybody. Dr. Nityanandam, I've been given to understand, we discussed this, he got his money back because he told the airline that your advisory, which says what all are banned articles, does not mention GNSS. Most airlines themselves are not aware of this. There was a case last month only where 2 foreign nationals were detained for carrying, those were of course GPSs with the satellite connectivity. But again, it's no use having a law if people are not aware of it. We all who are in this conference have been searching for a particular document which we know exists, but we've not been able to find it on the net.
I'll just maybe start with an example. So I have a device with me. So this is the GPS device which we are talking about here. If you notice the difference here, it contains an antenna at the top. And then on the contrary, I have another device. So there are 2 devices in my hand. The one which is in this hand, the black device, this is a transmitting device. And this one is only a receiving device. So this is a Garmin GPS, which most of the trackers carry with them for the outdoor activities. It is also used by the industry for ground surveying, collecting the samples. And this one is more of a complex device. It contains a software-defined radio and has a transmission capabilities. But the irony is that I can carry this one in flight, not this one. Why? Because this has a removable antenna, so I can connect the antenna and remove it. So the moment I remove this antenna, for the authorities, this is not more a transmitting device, and I can carry this with me, and that will be taken more of a console, maybe a gaming console, or maybe just a radio that we can listen to Radio Mirchi and different radio stations. So that kind of device it becomes when I remove the antenna. So this is the thing I think we need to understand. I think Satyam sir already had mentioned about it. If there is a disaster, some disaster has struck. Let's take example of like we have a lot of landslides happening in the northeastern region. Then we have a lot of glacial lake outbursts happening in the Himalayan region. So in such kind of area, when we have to provide the disaster relief support, there also such kind of devices are needed, and we need to see if we are putting restrictions on the utilization of these technologies. It is not only detrimental to the upcoming future technologies, be it in terms of geospatial and space sector, but also at the same time it is creating hurdle in the rescue efforts, in the disaster relief efforts. So this is what I think the authorities need to understand. And once we have this clarity that antenna doesn't mean that it is going to just transmit, it also means that it can receive as well. So if that clarity is there, I think we could be able to move forward with the changes where it's more of a liberal sort of policy where we can start having these technologies where industry can adapt to these technologies and start using it for the betterment of the society as well as for the development of future technologies as well.
Comment was made by Mr. Arup Dasgupta in the chat, who said that the problem is that technology always leads policy. Those who write policy need to be sensitized. I would not, I mean, I agree. Nobody can disagree that those who write policy need to be sensitized. But I would argue that those who write policies are not written, it's not a knee-jerk reaction, as somebody had said in the chat. It's anything in the government which happens, it is debated, deliberated on file, counter views are taken, and thereafter a very, very considered decision is taken when a policy is made in most cases. Hindsight is always the exact science, and sometimes you go wrong. But the problem is that this needs to be continually examined for the changes which have taken place. I mean, if that doesn't happen, that is where the problem comes. At the time when the policy was made, I think the policy might have been, I can think of a dozen reasons, for example, why even GNSS devices without satellite connectivity the garment sets which you're talking about may be banned, especially in sensitive areas. For example, if you talk about the Chinese Peitao, the previous version, the compass, it was two-way, which means it needed accurate height to resolve the position even in two dimensions. So if that be the case, some regulation might have been considered necessary. What happened in 2008, we are all aware, that might have been the genesis. So as I said, you should not have, the policies are considered, well thought out, but with technology changes, they have to be continually upgraded.
Thank you, all of you, and a very good debate. But at the end of it, again, what are the takeaways? And here, I think all of you need to put your heads together. Firstly, identify who are the stakeholders. So if it is related to governance, it is related to growth of the country and security. And if security is kind of impinging in this, then what are the ways of overcoming that? And at the end of it, it is the citizen whose interests have to be looked after. The government ensures security of the population also. So we need to have ways of having informed law enforcement. Now, if law enforcement today is from a basis of perception, not information or not knowledge, then things are not up to the mark. So while we may have our individual opinions about it, but my only point is how does the weakest link get strengthened in this? And these are the weakest links which are based on perception, not knowledge. Now, whether NSCS is the appropriate authority or there can be others also, because say, for example, you make a policy and it is still not implemented. So that means we have not taken note of all the stakeholders. There will be certain state governments, because state police is also important in this. The CAPF are important in this. The armed forces, like a very simple example, I'll tell you. All this discussion and information which was coming out as to how the search can be haphazard or it can lack the teeth because just an antenna has been removed. Now you have so many policemen carrying out searches, you have armed forces carrying out searches in certain areas. Is anyone aware of this? I don't think anyone is aware. So for ease of doing business is not related to only industry. Industry is important, but there are others also. So what we should give out as our recommendations is there has to be again use of technology to ensure the policy changes are proliferated right down to the last man or woman, gender agnostic in that. So let's not only look at narrow vision here. Let's try and put pointers so that this document is taken seriously. Otherwise, it will be yet one more document. So let's put our heads together and come up with our points. So the way Chakra Dialogue Foundation, we are all focused towards nation building. And when we say nation building, it is perfectly aligned to the vision which the Prime Minister has laid out for us is Viksit Bharat 2047, which means there is a lot of transition on the way. So if we have to be Viksit, obviously there are lots of changes, lots of growth, lots of development, which is in the offing. But along with Viksit, we have to be Surakshit. So thank you everyone for joining, and thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to the entire team of CDF for organizing this great discussion. Thank you and Jai Hind.